Good afternoon and welcome to the 121st episode of the Live Learn Lunch. And with us today, we have Phil Ashford of Enterprise Exchange. And I'd like to hand over to you now, Phil, to make a start.
Thank you, Emma. Absolutely delighted to be here. And thank you so much for all the people turning up today. There's such a big interest in self-employment. Absolutely delighted. As I say, my name's Phil Ashford. I'm the co-founder and co-director of Enterprise Exchange. I'm just going to share the screen and put a little presentation up and tell you what we'll be going through today. Okay. Just going to introduce myself a little bit and talk just very briefly about who Enterprise Exchange are. Then we're going to talk about which hard to reach groups can benefit from self-employment support. We're also going to do a little talk about the pros and cons of self-employment. So when you're talking to participants, that they're going in there with their eyes wide open and you have an understanding about what are the things that could be barriers to self-employment and what could be the benefits for your participants. I'm then going to talk a bit about assessment criteria for people who should be getting self-employment support. And this is just based on our company's experience over the last 10 years, and especially on welfare to work programs. And again, all of this will be up for discussion. We will then talk about evidence gathering. So when you're going for self-employment outcomes, we know that's really different than employment outcomes. So what sort of evidence is worth gathering to get your outcome, but also what is the best way of getting that evidence? Because that can always be a challenge. Self-employment is very different to employment when it comes to welfare to work. We know that the DWP criteria is 182 days of sustained self-employment. So we're going to talk a little bit about best practice, that after you have a participant who has started their self-employment, what is the best way of keeping that sustained for that year one and beyond? And then we're going to have a bit of a discussion and some ideas around the cost of living crisis and how that's going to affect self-employment and some of the new ways that self-employment might affect welfare to work when the cost of living crisis really hits. And then we're going to have a bit of time for questions. If there is any other subjects you would like me to cover, please put it in the chat, as I have left a bit of time in there for discussions about all these bits and pieces. Okay, so who are Enterprise Exchange? So we're a specialist agency that helps hard to reach people get into self-employment or start a business. We've been going for about 11 years. We've worked with over 5,000 people. And what we do is we started off very much in prison entrepreneurship programs. So we've worked in about 10 prisons across the country running self-employment programs. We've done that under contract. We've delivered qualifications. We've done non-accredited courses in prisons as well. And a little bit embarrassingly, our course was featured on the Ross Kemp Welcome to Belmarsh documentary, where we were on for about 5 minutes. Our self-employment program was on that. But our main work over the last sort of 5 or 6 years been in welfare to work. So we've worked on, we are working on the work and health program. We've been working with the Shaw Trust. We're currently working on Restart in the Midlands and Wales with Serco. And over the years, we've done lots of work with housing associations, community organisations, and a lot of the organisations you probably know, like your Maximuses and your G4Ss, etc. So we've had long experience in this industry. We also run a management development program, which we run with corporates. We've done it with Legal & General and John Lewis, where we train their senior managers to become enterprise mentors for our participants on our self-employment programs. And we've done that in prisons and also with ex-offenders in the past. We also publish Essential Business. So that's the UK's #1 startup course materials. We only purchased them a few months ago, and they have lots of online courses, fantastic workbooks and guides. We've been using them for 10 years, and now we actually own the IP for all those materials, and that's very early days on that. And we've also been doing a lot of stuff in technology delivering our services. So we have a subsection called Enterprise Reality, where we develop augmented reality, which we've been using in our workbooks for the past 3 or 4 years, and also virtual reality, where we've been designing an in-cell self-employment course in prisons using virtual reality headsets. We won a National Enterprise Network Award for enterprise engagement for our augmented reality. And in 2021, we won an Innovate UK grant, and we got a reward, an Innovation in Education Award, for delivering that in HMP Belmarsh. So let's crack on. So which hard to reach groups can benefit from self-employment and why? One that you've probably come across is people who are ex-offenders. Ex-offenders tend to find traditional employment quite hard to get. The main reason being disclosure of their criminal record. And also they tend to have CVs with big gaps, and they might have other things that traditional employment might not be quite right for them. Yet research has shown, and I sent you guys a link to this research report by the Centre of Entrepreneurship, is that ex-offenders are really good for self-employment potentially. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, in the prison system, they often do a lot of courses which fit self-employment. So that could be things like gardening, bricklaying, painter and decorating, all those sort of trades. But also ex-offenders tend to be quite entrepreneurial in their character. Often that entrepreneurism has got them into trouble in the first place. So if you can train them to be self-employed legally and use those entrepreneurship skills, they can be a really good way as a way into employment, and using self-employment as the route. Lone parents. We have had a lot of lone parents on our programs before. And one reason for this is childcare. Traditional employment can be really difficult and expensive for lone parents. But if a lone parent is doing their own thing and starting their own business, they can manage their work around the childcare and not the other way around. We also find that people with mental and physical disabilities who might find 9-to-5 traditional employment as a bit of a barrier, self-employment can be a fantastic route. So again, they can work around the condition that they have, not the other way around. So self-employment can give them that flexibility that they need. We've done a lot of work in the past, and we're getting a lot of people on our programs at the moment, is the over 50s. And they're fantastic for self-employment. A number of reasons is they're often very experienced, whether in the business world, life skills, etc. And some of them who've been made redundant sometimes have good startup funds to start a business. And over 50s, we're finding is definitely increasing in the self-employment arena. I also sent through a link from the Centre for Entrepreneurship about how refugees are really good for self-employment programs. There has been some research done that a lot of refugees who come to the UK often have run businesses in the countries that they came from. We've actually seen this on our courses from an anecdotal point of view as well. Also, to be a refugee, to actually leave your country and come to the UK is an incredibly entrepreneurial thing to do. So refugees are often very entrepreneurial types. So self-employment is a good way for that route to get into employment. We also find that in the job market at the moment, that a lot of people are having to do what they call portfolio careers. So they might have a part-time job, they might have a self-employment income stream, they might work in a pub, they might be doing 2 or 3 different things with that multiple income stream. And so self-employment is part of that income stream. So again, they potentially need the support. I hope that all makes sense. I'm just going to move on. Are there any questions on that before I move on? All quiet. Good stuff. Okay, I would like to do a little exercise now. I'd just like to run through the pros and cons of working for yourself. And I'd like you guys to just write down a few ideas of what you think the upside of working for yourself is and what you think the downsides are. If you could just do maybe one or two on each, one pro, two pros, two cons, and if you can put it on the chat, and then we'll have a discussion around it. And this is a really good discussion to have with your participants, so you can find out if self-employment is really the right thing for them. So if I'll stop sharing just for now, and then I'll be having a look at the chat. So Emma, if it's okay to read them out if they come through.
Of course. I've got some a mix. So Roxanne has said pro, flexible working hours. Elizabeth, another pro, you are the decision maker. A con from Jenny Hopkins, covering periods of illness. Another pro we've got is flexibility, and some cons, no sick pay or holiday pay, and also no guaranteed income. Luz has got a pro, which is again flexibility to meet family and personal commitments. So a nice one from Amy, doing what you love, absolutely. And then we've got some more cons, sorting the taxes. Beverly says isolation. And then so we've got the need to be self-motivated as a con. Ellie has put, again, the flexibility comes up a lot, time off as and when needed, and cons, national insurance, security, SSP, holiday pay. And lots of interactions.
Wonderful. Brilliant. And all of those are completely valid. So let's discuss some of those.
So did you want to address it? Oh, sorry.
No, we're all good. So we're going to go, we're going to talk through some of the downsides, and you've picked up on many of these. Financial security. We all know that if you're working for yourself, you might have a good month and a bad month, and especially people in the welfare to work. This is a huge barrier because they often feel that the benefit system will not support them, especially in that first year when income could be quite low on their self-employment income. But a couple of things we do in our programs is we do a whole section on benefits and how universal credit works with self-employment. And in that first 12 months, the universal credit will maintain their income even if they have months where their income is low or zero. So we do talk a lot about how benefits can support them, especially over that 12 months. It is really worth noting that after that 12 months, universal credit expects them to be earning something called the minimum income floor, which is around £250 a week. So what we advise our participants to do 9 months in is to do a review on where they think their business is going to be in 3 months' time. So then they can think about contingency planning or a plan B, which may be a part-time job or other ways of getting some income in. So they're not going to have their benefits cut off 12 months down the line. Also, sick pay and holiday pay. This is something which is an issue for all self-employed people. We've advised our participants that once their self-employment is earning some income, is to start putting a bit of money away every month so they can contingency plan, etc. Also, if they are going to have a holiday, we advise that they find someone who is self-employed doing something similar to them who can maybe cover their customers and vice versa. So for example, if you're a painter and decorator, you want to go on holiday for 2 weeks, you get another painter and decorator to look after your customers for those 2 weeks while you're away. So it's all quite seamless. Long hours. It's very important to understand that, especially in that first year, that they will be doing long hours and it will be quite relentless. And it's well worth asking your participants to talk to their family and partners, etc., that this journey will mean that they're probably going to go missing for a little bit. So make sure that you're talking to your participants about that from the off. Some of you guys mentioned this, the responsibility. It's all down to you at the end of the day. So all getting customers, whether it's the legal stuff, all those things, it's your responsibility. Something that doesn't come up very often is that running your own business can be quite lonely. And that doesn't mean you haven't got family and friends, What it does mean is that a lot of people don't understand what it's like to be self-employed. And especially with your participants who might have confidence, angsty issues, etc., and low self-esteem, they need to be around people who are going to pick them up and who are going to give them energy and ideas. So get them plugged into local networks of other people starting businesses as soon as possible. So that could be really simply getting them into LinkedIn, their local growth hubs, chambers of commerce, federation of small business, but make sure they're into positive networks as soon as possible. It's an awful American phrase, but we always say to them, hang around radiators, not drains. But it's very important in those early days being self-employed. Of course, the legal side of it, you know, there's all the tax, there's all the insurance, there's the health and safety, GDPR. Make sure they understand there's legal responsibilities. And also getting customers. It's going to be a challenge. They're a new self-employed business. Getting customers is going to be a hard work. So make sure you're having these conversations with your participants from the off. But now we'll talk about the upsides, much more interesting. If you get your self-employment right, you have financial freedom. It's down to your graft and creativity. Being your own boss, hugely important. Not feeling like you have to do your appraisal for your 1% pay rise. This is down to you. You decide what business you want to be in, what things interest you, what things you think you can do that will benefit you. Even though it's long hours, work feels different. If you're doing something you don't like, the clock goes backwards. Most self-employed people, even though they're working long hours, it goes really quickly and it feels different because they're doing it for themselves. Someone mentioned this, doing what you love, doing your passion. This is a huge driver for the self-employed. And it also helps with their selling. If they're showing that they're passionate about what they're doing, they tend to be better salespeople. A Greek philosopher said once, if you love what you do, you never work again. So if you're going self-employed, that's definitely a huge benefit. Also, if you're self-employed, you pay less tax than if you're in employment. If you're a sole trader or limited company, whatever way that you set up, you will pay less tax and national insurance. Also, there's a legacy. It might be if you're starting your self-employment or a business, you want to leave it to somebody else. You might leave it to someone in the family, or you might even want to sell it. So there's a potential legacy to what you're doing. And working for yourself, it's constant learning, and that is a positive. You will find that a lot of your participants find self-employment hugely overwhelming. As someone who started a business, I know exactly what that's like. You've got to be thinking about your marketing, your finance, all the different bits and pieces. But there is huge learning to that as well. I hope that all makes sense, and I'll move on. Okay, so how do you assess who is the right person to come on to self-employment support? And I'll just give you a bit of experience we've had in the past. We've been on programs where employment advisors have just put anyone who said, I want to start a business or go self-employment on our programs. And that was fine. But you could see very quickly that a lot of the people coming through didn't have a business idea that they'd really thought through, or they had lots of additional barriers that would mean they're very unlikely to start a business, that they might have had no funding whatsoever, and they were like, their business was going to cost a lot of money to start up, all sorts of different things. So what we've done on our welfare to work programs, we've come up with an assessment process that we do with our participants. And we normally do this, one with an assessment form that we use with the employment advisor, but we like to do a little 15-minute phone call with a participant and basically score it. And if they score it in each department that's over 50%, they can come on the program. But this is not about exclusion. So what happens is, if someone does not pass the assessment, we find out the reason why, and then go back to the organization that they're working with and see if we can plug that gap. So it's all about progression. And I'll give you an example of what I mean after I've been through a few of these. So firstly, your participant needs a business idea And again, this is just our experience. It might be very different to yours, but a commitment to launch the business in 3 months. So there is actually a target launch date. Obviously, if they go over that 3 months, that's not a problem, but it just focuses and keeps them accountable that they've got something to work towards. And that business idea is that they might have done a little bit of market research on it. They might have just looked at a couple of competitors or asked a few friends about the product or service. It doesn't have to be the full market research process, but the idea that they've had a good think about it. Another good way is asking them to work out their startup costs, because their startup costs will equal their need for funding if they need funding at all. And ask them to work those startup costs in detail. You might get a participant come to you, say, I've got a business idea, I need 10 grand to start it. Ask them, what is that 10 grand to be spent on in detail? And you'll often find that that startup cost will be a lot less after you've had that conversation. As I said before, the market research, again, nothing too academic or technical, just that they've looked into it a little bit. A commitment from them to complete a business plan. Now, most participants, when they hear the word business plan, will run a mile. So a business plan, make it something that is something very attainable and doesn't have to be too complex if the business or self-employment isn't complex either. But they must commit to complete a plan, because they've worked out that businesses are 60% more likely to survive if they have a business plan in place. So sell it to them that the business plan is actually a good idea, nothing to be scared of, is actually helps them increase their chance of success. You will know your participants. You know which ones have the resilience and who may not have the resilience. You may get people with all sorts of different barriers, whether that's mental health, whether that's confidence, self-esteem. Now, you as organizations can work with them on those additional barriers, but you will know the ones, however good the business idea is, that the barriers might be too high. So make sure that you have that conversation with the participant. And if self-employment isn't right for them, just talk about plan B. And the capacity and support to overcome additional barriers follows on for that. Your organizations know what capacity and support you have. So for example, on the Work and Health program, there's lots of support with mental health, there's support with housing, all sorts of different things, especially with ex-offenders coming out of prison. They might have a fantastic business idea, but if they've got nowhere to live, they've got no money and benefits, it's going to be very difficult for them to start that business. So make sure that you have those capacity and support to overcome those additional barriers. Literacy is an issue. They don't have to be the most literate people in the world, of course not. But in the business world, you will need to have some level of literacy to be able to write a basic business plan, deal with customers, write invoices, write proposals, whatever it might be. So make sure that they have that literacy. If not, put them on a literacy course to get them to that level. Digital capability. This goes back to what I was saying about if somebody fails and how you can support them to make it progression rather than a fail. So our programs recently have been remote. So clearly someone coming on our program would need to have a laptop or a phone where they can access Zoom. If they're running a self-employment or business, they will need to be using social media. So if they haven't got the capacity or the knowledge to use it, give them a training course or train them in social media or get them a grant to get a tablet or whatever it might be. So it's all about progression. So it's not about pass or fail. So that's just a few ideas how you can do that initial assessment. Again, hope it makes sense. Has anybody got any questions before I move on?
We've had a couple of more observations.
Yeah, go for it.
There. So Melanie Newman has written, it's my understanding that MIF can be applied at Gateway now if they've been previously self-employed. The decision is made by the reviewing JCP advisor to make the decision now that we are post-COVID. Some participants to restart can now be subject to this. And Daniel has responded to say that is correct. a 12-month startup period suspension of MIF is only applicable to gainfully self-employed people beginning a new enterprise. So someone who has not been previously, who's not had one previously in the last 5 years or doing a business of the same thing. And the only exception comes in is when someone starts self-employment with a new direction or a new business idea.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. So thank you very much for that input. Much appreciated. Thank you. Okay. So evidence. I think a lot of you guys will probably know that this is sort of evidence for sustainable self-employment. So I won't go into too much detail, but I do want to talk about how you can manage that and gather that evidence in the most positive way possible. So something called the UTR number, that's when your participant signs up as a sole trader. It's called a unique tax reference number. That's showing that they're ready to trade. If they're starting as a limited company, you want evidence of incorporation. So that's just some documents to say that they signed with Companies House. A business bank account is a good piece of evidence that we use, and evidence that they've got insurance, whether that's public liability or professional indemnity, whatever that might be. Evidence of a sale, that could be a photograph of a bank account that some money's gone in, could be an invoice, it could be all sorts of different things. There's lots of things digitally you can do now. That they set up a website and they've set up all their social media, that you can see that that's up and running and people are engaging with it. So how do you get this evidence? Because we find that participants, when you get to this point, they're busy starting their business and the last thing they want to do is run around sending you documents, etc. So we do a lot of this when we do the contracting with the participant right from the off. So if we say, we're going to give you 9 months support in your self-employment journey, you know, we're going to give you 100%, etc. But the one thing we do need from you is when we need evidence from you, that's part of the contract between us and you guys, that you provide that. We also, even though we have business advisors, we also have a case manager that works with the participant. And again, they're not there to advise business-wise as much. They're there just to keep the participant on track with their action plans, making sure there's no issues if there's stuff going on at home, etc. But the case manager is a really good soft way of just nudging them into giving you that evidence. And also ongoing, most of you will be aware, if you've dealt with self-employment before, something called a cash flow forecast. We get our participants to fill one of these in as a forecast, but to actually use it to do forecast and actual. So they actually update their cash flow at the end of every month with their actual results, and then they update their forecast. So this is an ongoing record of where they sit, where their business is at the moment, and where they're forecasting it going forward. So again, I hope that will make sense. Any observations coming through there, Emma?
No, well, we've just somebody has apologized that they had to quickly leave, and they've asked if they can have a copy of the slides afterwards, which I can manage that. That's fine. No problem.
Okay. So one of the biggest issues with self-employment programs is you can get some fantastic workshops where you get somebody all fired up, you get them to do a business plan. You know, they know how to do their self-assessment, they've signed up to their social media, and they launch their business. Now, it's not just hard to reach groups, but the stats for failure in the first year are huge. So I think it's something like 60–70% of businesses fail in that first 2 years or whatever. So what could we do as IEP professionals to do the ongoing support for that participant? One of the things that I mentioned a couple of slides previously is around plugging them into the networks of business support locally, but also networks of other people starting businesses at the same time. You'll find that that really, really helps when the participant realizes that they're not the only one going through what they're going through. It's a really, really powerful thing to do. So what we do is we support them going on. So we have ongoing business advice. They have the same business advisor that helped them put their business plan together. they have that support every month going forward. So if they need to tweak their business idea, they need that help and support to change their business plan, they have it. We keep that case manager there. They might not phone them every week, but they're there to just help them to do their actions, to give them links to support that might come through, to just put an arm around them if things are a bit of a struggle. And also at the beginning of the process, we do tell the participants that this is a roller coaster. There's going to be ups and downs. One thing that we do that's been incredibly powerful is facilitated peer-to-peer support. So we get groups of our participants once they've started, and on a monthly basis have a 2.5 session facilitated by a business advisor where they talk about their biggest challenge and you solve it as a group. It's known as action learning. There was a government program of peer-to-peer support for small businesses last year, some of you might have heard of, but we basically have replicated that and with action learning, and we find that that's incredible support for the participant. Also, it is very possible, especially we'll be chatting about this a bit later, that their business might fail. So always right from the off, have a plan B and do contingency planning from the start. So if things did go wrong, what is plan B? What can they do? I'll just give you an example. We get quite a lot of employment outcomes because we might have someone come on our self-employment program and then their business plan and their market research shows them that their business isn't really going to earn them enough money. So they end up going into employment. But by coming on the self-employment course, it's built their confidence and gives them some transferable skills. So look at plan B and contingency right from the off. As I mentioned before, the 9-month universal credit review, when they're 9 months in, get them to do a review of where they're at with their business and then what they need to do to hit that minimum income floor 3 months further down the line. Again, from the comments earlier, that might not be relevant to some participants. As I said before, plug into those relevant social networks from day one. Chambers of Commerce do free taster sessions. Federation of Small Business. There's a website called meetup.co.uk where whatever you're interested in, whether it's fly fishing, fashion, football, you can plug into it and meet up with local groups that are interested in what you're interested in. So there might be local groups that are people starting their own business that people could just plug into. And something, again, what we do is we make sure all our advisors and case managers have run a business or be self-employed themselves, so they can go through all the same things and talk about all the mistakes they might have made. And a big part of our course is the mistakes that Enterprise Exchange made in the first couple of years, that they can have that empathy and understanding with the participant to give them that support. Hope that makes sense. Any other comments, Emma, or shall I carry on?
There's nothing at the moment, Phil, but we'll keep our eye on it.
No worries at all. Okay, so before we go to questions, we just talk a little bit about the cost of living crisis and what's coming down the line. Firstly, the sustainability of self-employment for a lot of our participants is going to be under threat. As we do know, universal credit is not going to go up with the rate of inflation. And if people aren't earning a lot through their self-employment, it could be that they could be potentially unsustainable. We do not know what help the government's going to give to people who are on universal credit at the moment, apart from what we've heard with the energy prices. But it's well worth having those conversations now with your participants about plan Bs and contingencies. But there are some opportunities. Firstly, we're starting to see it already. Those in full-time work are now going to start looking at doing self-employment on the side, because to get their income up, because the cost of living is going up so much. What we're seeing is a lot of that is starting to be illegitimate self-employment. So people might be doing side hustles, and it might not be for any fault of their own. They just don't know what they don't know. So we see there's going to be a huge uptick in people doing self-employment as a side hustle to their main income. And they're going to need self-employment support in exactly the same way is that we're giving self-employment support to participants at the moment. We're also potentially going to see an uptick in unemployment. So that means the hard to reach groups that I spoke about before, like ex-offenders, lone parents, mental and physical disabilities, the over 50s, which at the moment in a buoyant job market might be able to find traditional employment, they're the ones who are might going to have to revisit self-employment if the job market tightens. Also, Enterprise Exchange, we started in 2010, and that was just after the crash. So we actually started in a recession, and we are probably going into a recession in the next couple of years. What we found was there are self-employment opportunities in a recession. So look to see with your participants where they might be. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In 2010, lots of people stopped moving house, and they stopped buying big ticket items like flat screen TVs, etc., as things got tighter. But because people weren't moving house, more people spent money on doing up their houses. So painter and decorators did better in a recession. Also, because people weren't buying big ticket items, they were buying themselves small treats. So a lot of craft businesses did quite well because people were buying smaller things as treats and presents than they would have done in more buoyant times. So in self-employment, there are always opportunities in a recession. So I hope that all makes sense. Questions, observations, here's my email address and our website. I'm absolutely delighted to talk to any of you on a personal basis if you want to drop me a line. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it hasn't been too much grandmother sucking eggs. But please, I'm going to stop sharing now, but any questions and anything up for discussion, we've got plenty of time.
Phil, we've just had a comment from Susie Anderson. She said, this is all really useful advice. Always good to have real examples to share with people. I'm also a massive fan of action learning.
Thank you, Susie. Much appreciated.
And Kerry Heverington has said, is this support available nationwide?
Really, really good question. I wish it was. No, it isn't, I'm afraid. We work with the Shore Trust on the Work and Health Programme on a contract basis. So we cover home counties, Norfolk, Midlands, but and on Restart, we can't do that. We're not doing the full programme, but we're doing some bits and pieces in Midlands and Wales. But it's a really good question because enterprise and self-employment support is quite fragmented across the country. That's a very good point to make.
There you go, thank you. Ella has said, thank you for the presentation. I work for the Restart scheme in Midlands with Serco. I was really interested in what you mentioned about enterprise advisor training. Could you expand on this at all, please?
Enterprise advisor training. Right, what could you just remind me what context that was? I'm just trying to remember what that bit was.
I imagine, is that what you do? Are you training advisors within Welfare to Work to be
right? Sorry, really good question. Sorry. We have done advisor training before. We've run for employment advisors. We've run courses for Maximus and G4S, and we've done it for some housing association advisors in the past. We haven't done it for quite a while, but we have that. We can do advisor training, absolutely.
And then also Susie has mentioned, she said, do you have any top tips for helping participants build their confidence around self-employment?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. What we try to do is, one, never say that their idea is not a good idea to do. What we do is we try and do that initial bit of market research, get them to do that initial bit of market research so they can work out for themselves if their idea has got potential or not. But in terms of building confidence, that's really around empathy, understanding what their barriers are. And also, but the big one is that even though they might feel really overwhelmed when starting their self-employment, everybody else feels the same. that feeling a bit overwhelmed and like there's a huge amount of imposter syndrome you'll get. So people say, oh yeah, I want to start a business, but I'm not the sort of person to start a business. Everybody else knows more than me. And it's really getting across to them that they're just as able to start a business as anybody else. And that's what I'm talking about, getting them plugged into those networks very early, especially of people starting businesses at an early stage, and that peer-to-peer support. If you can do that, that builds confidence very quickly. And if you are running self-employment courses, and this is something, I'll just give you an example, is when we started our course, our very first course was in HMP Lewis in a prison. Now, we had never delivered a self-employment program in a prison. So what we didn't do is do an academic course. Secondly, we did market research with the participants, and we asked one question. We said, if you were going to go self-employed, what help would you need? And we did 2 focus groups. And the things that came out were, don't treat me like a kid, give me practical support, lots of confidence, self-esteem issues, and all these sort of things. So we designed a whole program around what they said. So it was non-academic. It's all about engagement. It's all about peer-to-peer support. It's all about practical help and all these sort of things. And if you can hit those things, you will build the confidence of your participants. Sorry, I went that in a roundabout way. I hope it makes sense.
No, that's fine. And she's actually asked for the reverse as well. So if you have somebody that is dead set on self-employment and you don't think they're suitable for it, how do you approach this in the conversation? What
you do is you get them to do a business plan, and that business plan will show them that their idea is not appropriate. Then you've got evidence to say that the self-employment's not right for them. So get them to find out for themselves. And again, you know, a lot of the materials we use, it's all about putting business plans together, lots of exercises that they can do. And market research is so important. But when I talk about market research, it sounds like some big academic process. The way we teach it is very practical, and it's stuff that your participant could go out and do.
So then she said, and I can understand why she's asking this question, are there any really good resources available that you can recommend, such as business plan templates or bookkeeping templates?
Yes. Well, there's a couple of things you can do. On our website, in our resource page, we've got business plan templates, cash flow forecasts, so you can download for nothing. And I'll try not to do a pitch, but go to our Essential Business website or give me a shout. We've got loads of workbooks and online courses and all sorts that we might be able to help you out with as well.
Fantastic. We've got an early departure from Ellie, who has just said this is an amazing session. It's provided some really good information on assessing candidates for self-employment. I think that is the key thing, isn't it? Knowing how to assess somebody and whether the decision is right for them or not. So and then thank again, you. Susie said thank you. It's all been really helpful. So good engagement.
Wonderful.
Okay, so is there anybody else got any further questions or comments they'd like to make before we end the session today? Let's give them a moment.
And I'm really, really happy to talk to any of you on an individual basis at any time. So it's phil@enterpriseexchange.org.uk.
Thanks for, yeah, just lots of thanks for the informative session, about it being really useful, and just thanking you overall for today's session. So what I'll do is we'll end the recording shortly, and just thank everybody for attending today. And just a quick reminder that we have no Live Learn Lunch next week. We've got our digital technology conference, but that is a free event for anybody to attend. So if you do want to attend it, you could just pop along to the sessions that are as interesting as and informative that Phil's has been today. So very similarly driven, and you can find the information on our website, which Tracy's just popped into the chat room. So if you've got some free time next week, have a look at the sessions and register and come along and join us. So with that in mind, as I've said before, the session will be available in the next 7 to 10 days on our website, on our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for everybody for attending, and thank you, Phil.
Great to see you all. I hope it's been useful. Thank you so much.
We can wait for a second if you like, Phil.
Yes, please, Emma. Thank you.
Just give everyone a chance to. Okay. There we are. That was it. I was just making sure we were on our own. So how was that for you?
It seemed fine. I think the questions and the pros and cons and the response at the end seemed quite positive.
It was. Hang on, sorry. Let me just. My boss is trying to ring me, knowing that it's no. So I'm glad it was really engaging. Do you see what I mean? Once people get their confidence up.
Yeah.
So Helen, I'm just speaking with Phil a second. Oh, right. Okay.
And we need that stopped before you have a chance.